David, welcome back to the Mindshift podcast. How are we doing?
Thanks, Danny. I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be back.
Yes, I was listening back to the early episode because you was on my first season, right?
I
I think
was,
that's
yeah.
actually met. And can you remember what your log line was in season one?
Oh, it's a good question. No, I absolutely do not.
Okay. Your log line was an L&D battling the dark forces. Um, if I was to ask you what your log line is now, what would it be?
So I'd have to keep the L&D part in there, of course, if it's going to be part of my mission. Um, maybe um, maybe something like making L&D work. Is that all right, or is that a little bit too generic?
I think it works. I think it
Okay.
works. It's it's simple enough where I understand it, which is
Mm.
completely different to what L&D is right now. When I look around, there's just lots of new words coming out. So yeah, I like that. I like it. Um, but maybe before we get into this, I guess some of my listeners may not have heard of you in season one. So maybe give us a bit of a whistle stop tour of who you are and kind of where you are right now.
Yeah, sure. So if we cut straight to the chase and where I am now. I am host of the Learning and Development podcast, Danny. According to Listen Notes, one of the top 1% of all podcasts listened to around the world, and one of very few learning and development podcasts in that top 1%. So I would say that one of the most very popular podcasts in the profession. As well as that, I am Chief Learning Officer of 360 Learning, which is a very powerful collaborative learning tool. We can get into that later if you so wish. But I'd say that most notably, I was one of the founders of Loop, which was a learning platform, which our tagline was making learning work. And one of the reasons it was so important for me to solve that problem, Danny, is because I spent 15 years running learning and development departments, saddled with learning tech that no one used, and spending an inordinate amount of time trying to drive traffic towards it to justify the investment. So it was about time that learning tech actually worked. And I'd say that what I'm probably most known for is that I was director of learning talent and OD at the Walt Disney Company, and I was there for 8 years. So that's a potted history, Danny.
Nice, nice. I'm a fan of Disney in general, mainly from
Mm.
an experience design point of view, which is for another day. Um, but I guess there's a lot going on there. You know, the 360 learning, the loop.
Mhm.
Um, but before we get into all that, and I do want to get into all that, and actually, I want to get your kind of ideas on the future and the state of L&D now. But
Mm.
before we do, I ask my listeners two questions, and the first one is this: What's made you smile today?
What's made me smile today? Um, no, I'm very lucky that I've got a very beautiful 9 year old daughter, and she's such good fun. And although I'm not with her every day, I did have breakfast with her this morning, and we had a lovely chat. And she's always a delight. So yeah, at a very human level, spending time with my daughter Lily.
Nice, nice. And the follow up question is: I have a list of killer questions here, and it's numbered 1 to 12. And what I want you to do is pick a number for me in a second, and then based on that number, I will give you the question, and then we'll get the answer of it a little bit later on. So go for it. Pick a number between 1 and 12.
I believe three is the magic number.
3. Okay. Okay. This is good. So this question's only been asked once so far in the whole recordings what I've done.
Hmm.
So the question you've got, which I'll need to answer in a bit, is what's the one lie you're still telling yourself? Okay. So we'll come back to that a little bit later on. Um, okay, so obviously 360, you've got loop and all that good stuff. I guess you talked about kind of making L&D work.
Mm.
That was the log line what you opened up with. Tell me what even does that mean?
look, the subtext to that, Danny, is we accept working in a profession where we don't know whether the money we spend and the effort that we contribute leads to any meaningful impact beyond people telling us they liked it. Which could be all right. I mean, if we were a social media platform, the odd like, I mean, it doesn't like attention and likes is what is the currency that fuels those businesses. But that's not what we're in organizations to do. Like whenever there's a genesis of a learning and development team, there's part of a deal that's being set that employees will learn and they will be developed. That would lead to good things happening to them, or at the very least, more opportunity being provided to them. So there's that part of the deal. Then there is the somewhere between 350 to 400 billion dollars spent annually on learning and development. And the deal that our organizations have is that goes some way to improving performance and building capability, but we don't know whether we do. So I mean, there's on the very selfish side, because I've been in learning and development for 25 years, and there's some professional pride. I want to know that what I do makes a meaningful impact. Again, beyond people standing behind a class and going, God, this has changed my life. Because Danny, if that's a Friday afternoon, the thing that changed their life today, it's likely not really to be much of a memory even by Monday. Um, you know, People have good experiences on, say, training courses, not so much when they're doing e-learning. That's a different matter. But the way I like to describe it, Danny, is that if learning and development is a dance that everybody thinks that they know, right? So stakeholders ask for the dance. L&D goes, like we'll say, of course we could do that dance. When do you want the dance? And who would you like to come? Employees come along and they know how to engage as well. But Danny, this isn't strictly come dancing. We're not going to engage in a tango here. We're going to do a conga line, right? And I'm going to stand at the front and I'm going to put the music on and kick my leg, and everyone else is going to kick their leg as well. And everyone's going to love it. They're going to feel good while they're doing it. And in the immediate aftermath, there's going to be some elation. And you know what? They might even talk about it for a little while, but nothing's going to happen as a consequence of it. Like, learning and development is dumbed down a lot of the time to learning experiences. We either deliver learning or we provide learning. But most of that stuff isn't designed or procured with an actual outcome in mind that will improve what people actually do, because we don't understand what they actually do or the context in which they are expected to perform, or the organization doesn't actually hold us to account that what we spend will plan to make and has made a demonstrable difference. So look, the long and the short of it, Danny, is we're just about getting away with it. But I don't want to work in a profession that's just about getting away with it. And also, I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but Danny, I am. I spent a great deal of my career, certainly at Disney in the latter stages, not getting away with it, but actually making demonstrable difference, whether that is to an entire country's ability to do a different job with a pivot to digital publishing, whether it be the integration of different business functions so that we were increasing the possibility to leverage a lot of properties in Disney through one person, which improved deals rather than five different people going in and doing deals from different departments, and helping business functions to operate. No, I was going to say more smoothly, but that's not what I was brought in with. The example I'm thinking, less dysfunctionally, right? So I was actually held to account to do this stuff, and then you link talent management to that, which was part of my job. I turned conversations that went right. When's Danny going to be ready for the next position? I think Danny will be ready in 18 months, and then doing the same exercise 18 like in 12 months later. When's Danny going to be ready? Yeah, probably another 18 months. To actually go, whoa. Can we actually talk about what Danny needs to be exhibiting to actually in 18 months be in 6 months ready, right? So there's stuff like that which does come with you build up some credibility, you build up know-how, you build up confidence, you know how an organization works, you have the relationships that um, uh, you can utilize in order to get the right stuff done. So it does pain me that we we can so easily be swayed in this profession to look at a shiny new object and go, oh my god, if I can put my dumb content and generic crap into that, then that's going to solve all my problems. Because generative AI has given us the opportunity to do two things: L&D that works, or more crappy examples of useless stuff, but in a fancy wrapper. And I see far too much of the latter in L&D. So there's a long way to go. Does that answer your question, Danny? And
Yes.
any other questions you might have?
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the podcast. Thanks for listening. um, it's a funny one. It's a funny one. And I guess there's a couple of things that kind of get me thinking. You talked about the talent, like, oh, well, for Danny to be ready, it's 18 months. And I guess a lot of things which I see is actually, what is Danny needing to be ready for?
Yeah.
We make this assumption that A equals B and B equals C. And actually, I did some work recently where I just said to him, like, you keep banging on about learning development. What do you want learning development for? Like, what is it? And they're like, well, if you ask the leaders, like, we need them all to be qualified in X or Y. And I was like, okay, let me go and ask your people what they need.
Mm,
Like, tell me what it is they really care about. What is it? I went in and was like, I don't give a shit about that. I actually want to be over here. We had someone turn around and go, I'm not bothered about accounting. I want to learn how to do video editing. I'm
mm,
like, right. So there's a big wedge here. Leader, you want this. They want this. Like, there's this whole kind of debate. And I guess the other thing where you got me thinking about is this concept, this principle of streetlight effect, which is basically we stop looking for right content or right answers. Instead, what we do is we find that what is the easiest, and then we amplify what is the easiest, which doesn't always mean it's right. It's
mhm,
streetlight effect. It's a bit like that whole thing of drunk man under the light trying to find his keys. It's like, yeah, they're in your hand, mate. Like,
mm,
it's a kind of whole concept. Um, but I guess when I left L&D, there was a whole well, there's lots of circular conversations happening. One of them was like, how do content? Is it content? Is it context? Is it this?
mm,
Is it that? And I guess I've interviewed only a couple of people on from L&D in this season, and I guess some of the conversations have progressed, I think, and then some of them I'm still like, shit. When I really very first got into L&D at 2014, 15, these are the same conversations. Like,
mm,
if we're asking the same question, what the heck have we been doing for
mhm.
the last amount of years? So I guess, yeah, give me a bit of steer on where your head at is on where L&D is right now, just generally.
um, Look, I've got good reason to be optimistic because on my podcast, did I mention the Learning and Development podcast?
Oh, you're on a podcast.
On my podcast, I do invite people on who talk about stuff that they're doing that's worked. I think that it's a platform for that that um, that's meant to serve as inspiration and also breadcrumbs for those people who are ready to do stuff that works. So I do spend a lot of time speaking with those folks who inspire me and let me know that there are plenty on the right path. But what does still trouble me is that there are too many L&D leaders, practitioners, vendors, and business owners who think L&D looks and smells a certain way, and their lot in life is to do it that way. It looks like events, it looks like e-learning, it looks like platforms, and it's about meeting those expectations. One thing that drives me nuts, Danny, that for me tells me that we've not really progressed as a profession, or perhaps the social media part hasn't, is all this talking about learning. I just thought, oh, it just drives me nuts because the way I like to describe it, Danny, is imagine we replace the word learning with bus, right?
Okay.
So yeah, Joy, yeah. So yeah, buses are brilliant. We just need better buses. Yeah, if we had better buses, we could get people on more buses. Yeah, we should. Yeah, it's all about the buses, right? And I look, go, Daddy, I hate buses, right? I just, you know, I'm not the most sociable person at the best of times, right? So traveling with a load of strangers who are talking like with through the speaker on their phone, or listening to that out loud, eating their takeaways, and all, so you it's a really unappealing mode of transport, right? Why is no one talking about where it's going, right? Why is no one saying, right? What we should be talking about is going to the. I'm trying to figure somewhere really appealing I want to go, like the Indian restaurant, right? Okay, I tell you what, I'm bang up for that Indian restaurant. It's a bit of a way away. All right, okay. How do we get there? The only way is a bus. Do you know what? For that Indian restaurant, I'll do it, right? But learning and development people talk about the bus. Like it's the bus that's the important thing. Like learning is the important thing. Like if we got the learning bit right, then people would be able to do the things they're trying to do. But Danny, the kicker is if you don't understand what it is that people are trying to do and they're not able to do efficiently or effectively without your help, then you cannot determine where they want to go. So all this talk of buses and learning is a total and utter misnomer. And I'm afraid it's a really noisy market because the unfortunate part of that is the only real people who can really get under the skin of it are in-house L&D. So they've got to build up the internal currency in order to challenge their stakeholders to get to the actual nub of the issue. And until we get there, we're going to be talking about buses, right? We're going to be
Mm.
talking about creating brain friendly training. So, oh, grow up. Like it's nonsense. It's a total nonsense because you only talk about brain friendly training where you don't know the problem you're trying to solve. Because if you know the problem, you could probably solve it really easily, a lot more efficiently than trying to create brain friendly training. And apologies if for having a go at that, because I could have a go at so much more in L&D, which is solutions without understanding the problem. And I think that is it's almost inherent in the profession that without the confidence and enough competence to do the analysis, then we're always going to be lost. We're always going to be ripping and replacing big behemoth systems filled full of content, uh, bought on the premise that this one, unlike the other two that we got rid of, this one is going to get engagement and it is going to transform our organization. But you lift the lid and go, but wait a minute, it's just filled full of generic content. I know, but this one's AI powered, iterative, brain friendly. Think of all these buzzwords that the only thing it's not, Danny, is that it's not got anything in there to help people in your organization with the actual jobs that they are actually employed to do, to help them address the actual friction that they're facing, not just with the technical aspects of their job, but the cultural aspects that helps them to understand how to get the right stuff done at your organization. It's there's so much wrong, but what it comes down to is if you don't know the problems you're solving, then everything looks like the solution.
It's an interesting one, and I think I'm not sure if you know, David. I have a book out called The Insightful Innovator.
What's it called
Um,
again, Daddy?
it's The Insightful Innovator. But it's fascinating. There was a bit. I was having a conversation with someone recently. I was like, the hardest bit about the book was deciding what stays in and what comes out. And there was like, oh, right, I've got to take this out. So something like jobs to be done, I took out because I was like, that's great, but there's other foundations what need to be kind of in place first, which ultimately is sense making. Understand the problem before going, hey, here's some content and here's something else and here's something else. Find out what you want to do. If you want to get to the curry house, you don't want the bus journey. You just want to get to the curry house, the kind of, and it's interesting that the future, I guess, of these teams, these L&D teams, for me, I kind of like to call it an anti-fragile team.
Mhm.
It should be a team, the future of L&D is for me is a team what grows from shock. And actually the capabilities of what the future needs and what organizations needs isn't necessarily L&D, it's problem solvers. It's people from design thinking, service design, all these other elements what come into play because
Mm.
they don't come in going, learning is the answer. No, they come in going, we'll tell you what the answer is once we know the problem.
Yeah.
Until then, we're not going to go there. And I remember when we was on your podcast, we talked about this, right? Like right at the very start, we talked around don't go into solution seduction, like figure out what the problem really is first and foremost. So then, kind of following on what you're saying, then. So I guess I had a quick look on like what's happening in L&D on LinkedIn, which don't even get me started on that because LinkedIn's just a nightmare. But there's lots of talk around kind of skill development, stuff around kind of skill based kind of development. AI's in there somewhere, and it feels like there's a lot of big words and
Mhm.
a lot of terminology being thrown around. So I guess let me first kind of jump into kind of that whole thing around that skills development. Like, what even is that now? Like, what does it even mean?
Right. I'll first share the cynical side, but then I will quickly turn that around.
Okay.
Skills could be seen as, I've explored this both internally and with podcast guests. Um, it's the latest iteration of competencies, of behaviours, and capabilities. A way of HR trying to create control people top down, by creating categories that determine that these are the expected and rewarded behaviors that will be part of our performance management process that determines whether you're doing things right and you'll be rewarded or you're doing things wrong and you need to improve. But the reason that we're talking about skills rather than competencies, behaviors, and capabilities is that competencies, behaviors, and capabilities didn't work. So there's a rebrand. But this is the differentiator. The reason I don't think it's exactly like that is that we are facing global skill shortages, certainly in the West. And these are driven by older the older workforce leaving the workforce, so that there's an actual there's a people shortage as much as there is skills. Younger people are spending less time in organizations. We told them 20 years ago or so that there's no job for life, so they said fuck you. I don't want a job for life. So they're doing what Reid Hoffman called in his book The Alliance, tours of duty. So they're coming for the experience and the development, and then they're going. If
Mhm.
they so wish, they don't have the loyalty because the loyalty was taken away from them. Then you've got also emerging skills aren't as readily available in the market. And if they are, and they're highly in demand and they're emerging, then they're really expensive. And this isn't L&D saying this is business leaders and recruitment teams. So where this is actually different is that learning and development have jumped on, and so they should, an opportunity to help their organization with something absolutely critical to its survival if things aren't going so well, but its potential to fulfill its goals. But what I do love about this, I think a mutual connection of ours, Miriam Neelan, when I had her on my podcast, we talked about this, and she said, "Well, if L&D haven't been upskilling and reskilling people for the last few decades, what have they been doing?" And I thought,
Go
good
on,
point.
go on, Miriam, go on.
Yeah, good point. Right. So it's always as if so the business has gone, we've got all of these problems, right? L&D, right, and whether you look at Donald Taylor's global sentiment survey, it's been up there in the top three priorities for L&D for a long time. There's an entire industry and in by L&D solutions around skills. But the big kicker is, Danny, the reason this is still a big thing is that we've had learning and skills platforms for a decade now. Guess what? Pretty platforms filled full of content don't upskill people, right?
Mm.
There's the kicker, right? Even if you've got learners that know how to learn, don't even get me started. 10 million pieces of content and a smart algorithms that helps you filter generic content that doesn't relate to anybody's job. Oh my God, it's still a priority because none of it worked, right? So you've got a problem that is even more urgent than it was before, and a learning and development team that I think finally with AI can eliminate the heavy admin involved. When I was at Disney, we did this exercise on job families. Disney, certainly in EMEA where I was, there were all sorts of different levels, and depending on where you worked, the different levels didn't actually cross across the organization. You had executive directors in one area. You didn't have executive directors in another area. Administrators, coordinators, and assistants were doing all the same job, but coordinators were being paid more, and all of this stuff. It just needed to sort itself out, because if you were going to operate as one coherent business, then you needed to provide career paths and opportunity, so that not only were you rewarding the people correctly today, but people could actually see that they could get on. Imagine being a manager somewhere and earning 65 grand and then being told, we got an opportunity as a head of, which is the next level up, but you're going to have to take a 10 grand hit on your salary. So what? Like, so
Enjoy.
you just had to sort it out, right? And then you press publish on it, and then 1 year later, half of it's out of date, because business moves on. So now AI can actually help with the mapping of that, both benchmarking externally as well as internally, the jobs and the skills, and then learning and development where there is actually a problem. And so this comes down to it. It doesn't actually do the analysis for you, because the long and the short of it, Danny, is that 50% of your organization is probably all right. Just leave them alone. Don't create or provide solutions for something that's not an actual problem. But where you've got, say, I had Sarah Allen from Aviva and Molly Howes, her colleague, talking about how at Aviva, they're seeing AI as a legitimate threat to customer service people, but wanting to be an employer of choice and an ethical employer, they want to take their 200 telephone support people and upskill them on digital, and then actually hire them into emerging roles. I think that's amazing. And do you know what their measure of success is, Danny?
Go
That
on.
200 people will have digital roles. There you go, right? Which determines that their path. So they haven't bought a behemoth platform filled for the generic content, tried to encourage people to be self-directed, and then hope that it happens. They've got incubators where they actually train people, mentor them, and then have them shadow and perform, so that they get the actual experience. And so then they're put in front of the hiring managers so that they can actually get these jobs. Now, it sounds almost futuristic compared to the way that learning and development is done elsewhere, but it just shows you that we can achieve incredible things. When you say incredible, it's what the organization just did.
Mm.
Why would you have a team called learning and development that's there to actually help people learn and develop, if you didn't have the expectation that people will be performing better today and then ready for future roles tomorrow? But not a lot of L&D teams are stepping up to the mantle.
But I guess, why is that? When I guess there's lots and lots of talk, and I guess when I got into learning in 2014, I remember my mentor at the time, shout out to Sakib, was like, "Look, L&D is always for the chop. When time gets
Mm.
tight, L&D is the first one, heads on the block, and then it'll cut through on HR, and it'll come on this." And I remember thinking, "Great, that means that every single part of that system is working with lots and lots of fat.
Hmm.
So they're not working lean. They're doing lots and lots of fat, and there's probably lots and lots of duplication." I remember working with an organization, a recent organization, and I remember having a conversation with my boss. I was like, "If this is me and this is my company, the first thing I'm going to do is bring in Bain and Co. and go analyze this whole business
Hmm.
and find out where all the duplication is and get rid of it all, because there's 5 or 6 people doing the same job, which makes no sense." Um, but then I guess, when I start to think about the skills and I start to think about the future of where work is going to go, there's lots and lots. I guess when I start to maybe speculate a little bit bigger, I go, "Oh, there's lots and lots of roles what's potentially going to disappear, and more roles will bubble out because of it. Like, more roles will come about." But how does that even happen? Like, how does someone go from, I don't know, I want to be in a call center, I want to be a customer service advisor, to actually, no, I want to go and learn, I don't know, X or Y over there. And how do you reverse engineer that to go, well, here's all the kind of skills what you need to in order to do that? How does someone kind of kick that off and get the ball rolling?
Well, first of all, I think it's really important not to think of it as a one-to-one exercise. It
Mm,
should be organization-wide and cohort-based. Um, by simply thinking that we turn the needs analysis upside down, and so it's kind of it's like an individual free for all in which we need to plan and then demonstrate our impact, I think is fruitless. Um, it's not where we as L&D should be applying our attention. I think that the the way I described it is that for any job in your organization or job level, then generative AI can map both internally the actual job and those relatable jobs as well. So one level up, one level down, and those jobs sideways. But also to benchmark those externally, because there's no point in I mean, I've been a hiring manager. You go, can I have the job description for the last L&D coordinator? And you take a look, and it says, I don't know, like stuff in there to maintain all parts of the learning cycle, to maintain the books in the learning library. You have a look and go, sorry, when was the last time this updated? 1998, right? So to stop that from happening, the external benchmarks are really helpful as well. So it can actually scour sites for up to date um, uh, um, job descriptions and the skills related to it. Which when we think about what people want to learn at work for or engage with L&D, it's to be better and faster at their jobs, because if they're better and faster at their jobs, they look good, they might be paid more, and to improve their prospects.
Mm,
Again, like we're none of us are doing this for fun, are we, Dan?
no.
Regardless of how many people in HR might tell us that you might get a greater commitment if people have all these additional parts, or feelings or connections to the work. The nuts and bolts are, it's about feeling security and improving our prospects. Um, so if we're benchmarking as well, then we're helping people to feel as if whatever they do to develop themselves, they become more marketable. But the first part is in the analysis. So you do the job mapping first. The second part is in the skills assessment. There isn't just one part of this. Do you remember when Microsoft acquired LinkedIn? And LinkedIn's statement said something like, this is really smart move from Microsoft because we know more about your employees than you do. And you have a
Mm,
look and go, no, you don't. What I did is I ticked everything I could see regarding learning and development, and mostly people I've never met before, as a way of ingratiating me, or before they sent me the sales DM, they endorsed me a few skills, right?
mm,
It was the silliest way that you could possibly do it. So what you need is some kind of blockchain, like, don't you? Some way of me going, this is what I do. Some of your boss to go, no, this is your level. Then you've got peers who go, this is your level. Clients and stakeholders, and people that you work with going, these are the skills that you have, as some way of. And this again, so what's the problem that's solving? It's so that a hiring manager can take a look at the assessments that are being made and say, do you know what, Danny's worth interviewing for this, right? I'm not going to
mm,
give you the job, but it's going to be an aid, right? Now, quoting Donald Clark, generative AI is as bad as it's ever going to be right now, but what I've just described exists. Now, what we've got to do is keep an eye on the goal. The goal is that we have a way of both assessing, mapping, assessing, and then providing career paths for people in our organizations, so that we've not just got keen and willing self-directed learners like who are just following their passions. I might be a software developer, but one day I want to be a flutist. it's, it's it's not, but there are L&D teams that provide all of this. But we don't know what people want to do, right? Give them career paths, show them when you're here, you could get here. If you want to go sideways, the transferable skills can take you over here. But this is all dependent upon there being a job opening and you being ready, right? So whilst the job opening is coming up, I'd be doing this if I were you, right? Not just sending people towards generic content, but understanding as L&D that those transferable skills, what that means actually here. If we think of something like influencing stakeholders, right? You could buy a book on it, you could get some e-learning, but nothing will tell you how to influence stakeholders in your organization. So influencing stakeholders is absolutely critical if you're going to gain support for your ideas, if you're going to develop a profile worth your salt, if you are going to gain additional resources in your organization. You need to understand how your organization works. Are decisions made by consensus? is there like tall poppy syndrome where the tall poppy will be cut
Sure.
down? Um, are you is it truly entrepreneurial? And do you actually need to gain support more broadly and maybe get a sponsor? All of this stuff is going to be unique to your organization. So you've got to give somebody a map of the territory and say, right, this is what's required here. This is the benchmark outside. But to actually truly develop the transferable skills to put you in the best position for a hiring manager, this is the secret sauce. This is how we do it in our organization. And generative AI can help us with every single part of that, because whereas a lot of L&D is about providing the learning, which is, I've mentioned it before disparagingly, vast suites of e-learning or learning content, um, or an exhaustive curricula, um, a lot of it's absolute nonsense. It's going to make absolutely no difference whatsoever. There's research and studies to back that up. Not least Dr. Richard Clark, Dr. Dick Clark, who shared with me his near far transfer, which actually states if the learning environment isn't almost, if not exactly the same as the working environment, then there's almost no chance of learning transfer. Almost none. So if you got 10 million bits of content that don't actually relate to the work that people do, that you might as well have flushed it all down the loo. It's not going to make any difference, right? And there's only a very small percentage of people who can actually take like something that's broadly generic and apply that to their actual situation. So what you actually need to do is turn your organization's proprietary know-how that may be tacit in people's minds. It might be observable, so you can see it in the way that people work, and it may be documented in some way. And this might be the bridge between learning and development and knowledge management. You need to get it out, get it down, let AI turn that into guidance and support that is linked to how people actually are exhibiting the expected and rewarded behaviors, so that everyone stands a great chance. Now, I'll go back to, if you plug that into your organization's Google Docs, it'll probably be a shit show right now, but this is as bad as it's ever gonna be. So I think that we need to just jump on board. The principles are there, the raw technology's there, but in the same way as ChatGPT 3 was launched less than a year ago, just less than a year ago, from when we're recording this, to right now, with the advances that have been made with its incorporation into Microsoft documents and the co-pilots, into ChatGPT for enterprise, and everything that's coming down the pipe, we are months away from it supercharging L&D's efforts to actually assess and upskill people in our organizations in a way that we would only have dreamt of, just a year ago.
It's fascinating, right? Because you either sit on one side of the coin, you're either excited by that or you're shit scared by that, depending on who you are within an L&D function or what you do.
Yeah.
And I was chatting to the AI global head of AI at IBM a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying 94% of HR interactions with its employees, and I think he talked about the L&D in there as well. It's already done through their AI. 94% of HR interactions is done through automation and AI. And you go, cool. So what's your HR doing now then? Like if
Yeah.
94%,
I completely agree. If you imagine, right, so your employee relations, right? So a lot of business leaders will have their employee relations business partner, and they're there saying stuff like, uh, at our, like we're the we're not hitting our targets. We've got to make a really quick decision. We've got to get rid of half the workforce, and we need to do it straight away in order to uh, to balance the ship. Right, so that's what we've got to do. How do we do that? Right? They don't ask, can I do that? They said, how can I do that? Right? Your employee relations person is going, oh, that'd be really tricky, especially in Germany with the workers' councils, right? So you're going to get a very conversational approach. Stick it in ChatGPT, right? It will just give you the facts. It will, like, you can guide you, keep you on the right lines. So a lot of that stuff, if you want to know the law, you want to know, boom, right? We know that there are some accuracy issues within there, so you probably want to have it go past the employment lawyer as well. But if you're dealing in transactional HR, or transactional L&D, the chances are you could find yourself, looking for a new job very, very quickly. But if you're not, if you're strategic and you're actually aligned to actually plugging skills gaps, if you're working alongside your workforce planning in order to prepare your organization for what's just coming around the corner, if you are actually trying to help existing cohorts to address friction and actually perform today, there is a job for you. But if you are just trying to provide more content and plug holes and get people to click in your platform, look,
Mm.
there's that's not even a job anymore.
It's fascinating. I was having a conversation with a CLO a couple of weeks ago. Who was on this podcast actually. I remember having a conversation with him 4 years ago. I was like, "Do not get into the content game." Like, and at that time it was called no, what was it called? Can't remember the terminology, but basically it's dial free, right? Like it creates content for you straight away. Um, I was like, "That's coming in 2 years. Your job will disappear."
Mm-hmm.
And if sorry, it said in like a few years your job will disappear. And he was like, "Oh, I don't think it will." And then 4 years on, I'm having this conversation with Spin. I'm like, "Do you remember that conversation?" And she was like, "Yes, I do." I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"This is the thing; it progresses, and often it'll come slow. But if you listen to the signals, like for me, I guess when I think about, I hate trends, like, but signals and shifts and waves, like you'll get a ripple, which is a signal. When then ripples come together, they create a wave, and that tends to be a shift. What's going to happen? Um, but I think when I'm talking to a lot of people now within L&D or OD or whatever you want to call it. And actually, I spoke to a few end of last week and this week, and there's two things what seem to be really jumping out at me. And I think remember the article I wrote why I left L&D and why you should too.
Mm-hmm.
That still
I
gets
do.
likes now, and even now I'm like, wow. I was even going to take that down at one point, um, but one thing what I'm hearing is there's a lot of disheartened, like people feel quite disheartened in L&D. And I think they're disheartened for a couple of different reasons. If you're new coming into a world of work, and most people in L&D don't find their way into L&D because they want to be in L&D. It
Mm.
just happens. What advice would you give to someone who's new coming in to L&D/OD/performance, effectiveness, whatever? Like they're coming into a bit of a crazy world, right? It's a bit
Mm.
bit chaotic. There's a lot going on. What what would you do other than time not to get into it?
No, I think it's a really exciting time, but there are pragmatic and savvy things that they need to do, as well as future proofing. So the political and savvy things to do are understand from your bosses what L&D is in your organization to do. What are their expectations? What do they think are the core skill sets? And learn from observing how L&D is done in your organization. Now, you will learn very quickly whether that's something you believe in or whether you don't, and whether you need to uh, get the years under your belt by sucking it up and then getting the hell out of Dodge, um, to go and do it elsewhere. But like any profession, there's something about just earning your stripes, and you can learn just as much about stakeholder expectations in a team that's not making any impact, that seems to be stuck in the 90s, than from one that perhaps, and maybe you learn more than from one that is on the leading edge now, that's data driven and has credibility in the organization. And the reason is that you are always one new head of L&D away from either advancing or regressing. I
Mm.
know of some very progressive learning and development teams that when the head of left, the new head of came in and went, "Where's your LMS full of content? Are you missing a trick here?" Right. And so what they did is they just bought in the dumbest platform that they had in their last organization, launched it, got the credit for it, they rode the wave, and they just implemented good old fashioned L&D that we don't know makes any difference. But then you could be working for one of those and then they leave, and then either someone's promoted, or like's happened in um I was going to name a name then, but I think that probably wasn't going to be a good idea. And it's happened in a very famous retailer here in the UK, who's hired a very forward thinking and well known global head of L&D, and is really getting them shipshape. And I'd imagine that that is one hell of a ride to be on. It's going to be really challenging because retail is challenging. But in order to challenge yourself to be an L&D team that hangs its hat on efficacy, that's where you want to be. So going back to your question, what would you do? You need to be pragmatic and you need to be savvy. Take the learning from where you are, understand what you stand for, but you've got to go where the profession's going. It is data driven. It's going to be data driven because we can't hide for much longer, Dan. Like generative AI, for one thing, is going to put a spotlight on a lot of the people problems that actually need addressing because it's costing the organization money and opportunity. So that's going to be more readily available to leaders and HR and L&D. So being data driven is really important. Schooling yourself on product management or product ownership, I think, will be really helpful because it incorporates both the understanding of a problem from enough angles, a partnership approach with the people who you're seeking to influence, and adding meaningful value so you know that you're making progress based on the analysis that you've actually done. That doesn't need to be exhaustive, but I think a product ownership approach is a good way of kind of encapsulating that. And then, as far as technology is concerned, let's have a think. I was going to put the cart before the horse there, but I'll precurse this. If you know the real problems, if you're doing the analysis, you've got, say, a product approach, or you're benefiting from being, say, an L&D business partner rather than something that's more separate or satellite. Then understanding how AI can help you to achieve what you're in the organization to do will probably help you not be sucked in by vendors selling solutions to non-problems, which our friend LinkedIn is full of at the moment. So I suppose that would be my advice, but you just can't get away from learning from people around you how to actually be savvy, build currency in the organization, because that stuff is transferable. And the sooner you learn that, the more successful you'll be.
So I want to get your this is by no stretch of imagination going to be scientific, but in my Get Knotted Loser last week, I talked around the percentage of roles in organizations being bullshit jobs,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, and for the listeners, bullshit job is basically a job what you can take out of the business, and or you're doing a role which has no value, and you can take it out, and no one really give a shit. You can't say that for nurses, for surgeons, even for bin men, right? Take bin men out, a few days, the streets are on their ass.
Mm.
But I think for a lot of people in leadership, L&D, and these other things, like, and even comms to a point, right? Like, to a certain point, your role's going to become a bit like that. What do you think the percentage is of organizations you see right now, and maybe it's from an L&D lens, are doing bullshit jobs?
Right. So I think from my for looking from my experience, I reckon that a lot of organizations I work for, you could reduce the headcount by a quarter and you wouldn't, and you need to shake things up,
Hmm.
but I think that things would work more efficiently. I think that there are good people covering the backsides of not so good people, whether those people just aren't at it, like who aren't giving enough, um, or they're just not contributing enough. And I think
Mm.
that those people, we've all worked with them. You look and you go, what do you do? And it's not their job title, it's their style. So I've worked with people who are brilliant at playing the game. They profile themselves. I've been in those meetings where everyone's presenting their what they're up to this year. So this is my plan, right? We're going to overhaul performance management. We are going to um, uh, introduce so and so initiative. Talent management is going to be overhauled so that we're not talking about the times that people will be ready, but the actual activities and all of this stuff. And someone says, I'm going to be uh, uh, looking at our reward system. We're going to introduce a new portal for employees. Right. So there's all this big stuff. And then someone
Mm.
says, yeah, I'm going to make sure the HR managers know all about all the things you're doing. I'm going to manage them and make sure my clients got all the support they need. Right. So you're going to take the credit for all our work and you're going to use it as a profiling opportunity to cover your backside and you're not going to do anything else. Right. Stuff like that, Dan. Right.
Mm.
I'd get rid of that one.
Yeah.
Right. Because there are some people in our organizations who are really good at using the organization for their own benefit, right? Rather than adding the value that you'd expect from paying them the wage. And I reckon it's about a quarter of the organization of people who are perhaps coasting. So I reckon
Mm.
we can cut them. But I'm not sure that those are bullshit jobs. I just think that you've perhaps created a support system around rubbish workers.
Yeah. Yeah. It it's a tricky one because if I think about some of the organisations where I've helped, in sometimes it often comes down to a unaware leader. So
Mm-hmm.
I was having a chat with our mutual friend Gemma Patterson recently, and we was chatting about this, and I was like, "You've often, we were going back and forth, and the general feel what came out was actually you've got this person at this role up here. I mean, you've got this layer underneath him of these great, sparky, kind of innovative people, and they're like, they're smashing the ceiling because, like, no, you're doing this wrong. Like, you're using old school change frameworks and whatever else, and then it's that case of you find yourself just butting the heads of this one person at the top because they refuse, they either have a lack of self awareness, or they refuse to change because ultimately their bio in the business is how do I look good? And
Yes.
they add this ambiguity into it to kind of go, well, this is where I add this value in this
Mm.
ambiguity space. Like utter bollocks. If you disappeared, the business would be much better because it would be direct, it would be
Yeah.
leaner. And I just think becomes a point where you can go, yes, I can push uphill, push uphill, push uphill. But at some point you are just impacted by a shit leader
Yeah.
and there's just no way around it. That's a bit of a rant there. I went off on
I think I've worked with that person as well. No, that right. So yeah. So yeah, your boss's boss's boss, and they are motivated by looking good. So much effort, too much time is spent trying to make them look good.
Mm.
Um, I was in a job, and whenever that leader was coming over to the office, we used to reference Return of the Jedi. I don't know if you're into your Star Wars, where it goes like the Emperor is coming and he's not happy with your progress. Okay, we'll redouble our efforts. So it was all about how to make the Emperor look good. It's like, oh my
Yeah.
god, nonsense.
It's madness. It's madness. Tell me about 360 because
Mm.
obviously I'm not in the learning world too much now, and there's talk around Venderly coming back, but
Mm.
and so I've kind of slowly started to look at actually what the space looks like. But obviously 360 acquired Loop, and that's probably about as much as I know.
Mm.
Obviously, we speak every now and again, and I know a little bits, but yeah, tell me a little bit more about 360.
Yeah, so 360 acquired Loop at the end of 2021, and it totally made sense because Loop was built on the premise that, well, first of all, it was the learning platform that I wish I'd had. Like all those years of trying to drive people towards a platform to increase engagement and justify the investment, even though people were voting with their lack of engagement, that it just wasn't valuable, right? So Loop was created to say, well, we'll only create useful stuff, right? So it's a super intuitive, easy way of creating resources to help solve problems that scaled local know-how from within the organization for the benefit of everyone, right? And the first thing that we found with Loop back in the day was so I joined in 2015 was everybody loved it. You put it in front of
Mm.
employees, they absolutely loved it. And we're like, whoa, wait a minute. There's some secret sauce on this, because people don't like their learning platforms, and people, it's just really easy. It's really intuitive. I can see what I need. Search is great, and it's only got stuff in there that's aimed at helping people do their jobs in this organization. So that's how we built it out, and then we built campaigns around it, because the value that you have in a learning platform isn't that people know where to go. It's that before they even think of that they need some help, you surface stuff. You give
Mm.
them a text, or they might get an email, or something will surface in Teams or Slack that says, "Oh, you're doing that. This could be useful." So it's about guiding, supporting people to do more of the right stuff. So 360 Learning snapped it up, because that's what they did. But they did it massively for enterprise clients. Their whole thing is collaborative learning. It's the world's number one collaborative learning platform. It helped that they got $240 million worth of funding, which at the time, and maybe still might be the case, was the single biggest raise by a corporate learning platform ever. So they brought us up because, we had the smarts and the people that was going to help to take that to the next level. So the beautiful thing is that, so I joined them in 2021, and it was almost like fast forwarding 5 years in loop. It was like, wow, you're 10 times bigger. You're 10 times as many clients, 10 times as much revenue, 10 times as many employees. Bit of a culture shock, because there was just a handful of us punching well above our weight. But the absolute the brilliant part about it was that when generative AI and ChatGPT hit in November, we all got together and went, right, where's this going to go? And well, I've already told you, like, you go, if what was it? I cobbled together or bastardized the Henry Ford quote, like, for a Forbes article that I wrote, that said, if I asked L&D what they wanted, they would have asked for faster courses, and that's the way they went, right? So L&D went, look how fast I can create a catalog. Look how quickly I can create this AR, augmented reality leadership module. Look at it, oh my God, L&D lost the plot again, because that's what we talked about earlier, Dan.
Mm.
If you've done no analysis, everything looks like a solution. And so the more that you've got, you live in an abundant world, all you need to do is press a button and you've got all the content that you need. But that's not the way the world's going, because employees again will vote with their attention, and they will not click, because they don't want content. They want help with what they're trying to do now that they're not able to do easily and effectively in service of the job they're trying to do, so they look better in their organization, so they improve their prospects. It's all, that is it. And the if you could use AI and your vision in L&D to reduce the friction, so that you can help them to do what they're trying to do but better, then you're on a winner. Remove, don't add, remove, take stuff away. So this is what 360's mission was as well, that instead of buying that behemoth, what you should do is understand what it is that your people are trying to do and they're not able to do. And so they've got this brilliant thing within there about upvoting learning needs. So you're trying to do this. You've joined 360 Learning. You have a look, go, well, it's a fully remote team. How do I get to know how to do the right stuff and how to get known for doing the right stuff? There's a learning need, but it's not a learning need. That's actually a request on how to understand something that's
Mm.
integral. So that's then upvoted. Something's created on exactly that. So actually helping people to do that stuff, but that works across enterprise. So there are customers like Michelin, like global around the world, Haribo, Decathlon. These massive enterprise clients
Great companies.
who are using this approach to understanding the needs of the individual in order to craft collaboratively created content that stays dynamic, but is all around helping people to do what is required in your organization. So that's kind of the kicker. But I'll invite you back into the conversation again in a sec, Dan. Once I've finished, that we recently acquired Elamp, which
Mm.
is an AI powered skills tool, which helps to map an organization's skills, benchmark against external roles to create career paths for individuals, so that when you add that level of understanding, and also the individual skills assessment, which can be validated by managers, peers, stakeholders, you name it. So you've got kind of this validated assessment of what somebody's capability is within their role and the benchmark role. Then
Nice.
the collaborative learning element can help somebody to become even more valuable inside the organization, so that when it comes to their how appropriate they are for open roles, they're in the best possible position, so that hiring managers can take a look at that kind of assessment. It doesn't replace the hiring process, of course, but it goes a long way to making sure that the people who work in and understand your culture are better placed than the people who don't work there, who don't understand your culture, which has always been a problem that I've considered, that if you're over relying on external hires because you're not developing your people, that you're missing a trick. But this is where I believe that the ELAMP for 360 learning, but generative AI used in the right way for L&D, can finally have us say we're doing valuable stuff because, and then you can point to the internal mobility goals and metrics, rather than, oh, they completed it and they stayed to the end and they liked it.
Nice. And I think there's something really nice about that. I guess when I'm when I'm thinking, the bit where you just touched on there, there's a thing what happened recently with IDEO, right? Like they've just announced a massive layoff. IDEO, for them who don't know, is a massive design innovation company. Recently, pretty much thought as maybe in the top three biggest innovation companies. And there's this thing around, oh, we're getting rid of everyone. And I'm like, well, what did you expect? Like the biggest shift I've seen probably since 2019. In fact, when maybe the second time I came on your podcast, it's like there's a shift from bringing companies in to help us with our problem to bringing companies in to help our people with our problem. There's a
Mm,
massive shift. So there's this whole capability change now. It's like we don't need to keep buying the capabilities. Help us develop our people so that they can look after their own problems.
yeah.
It's like, and then you've got this big shift of people going, I'll give you a 1 day boot camp on design thinking. You'll know anything. I'm like, you set them up for failure because they're going to go out. They're not going to be able to deliver anything. There's going to be no business impact. There's going to be no decent outcome out of it. And then it's going to go, that was a load of shit. I'm not going
Mm,
to do that again. And I think what I like about that and what you've just discussed there, that kind of whole ELAMP and how that is, there's a big focus on, like, say, delivering internal value, right? Like
mm.
that sounds like that's where it is. It's like a flywheel where it's constantly flying back into the
That is it.
organization. I really like it. I really like it. So I guess I want to be mindful of your time as well, but I've got a couple more questions. I won't be mindful of the time, but I'm going to take some more of it. Um, I guess for me, when I think about AI, and I was having this conversation with who was it with? No, I can't remember. Someone who's younger than me anyway. And it's like, what do you reckon? He was talking about like future of work. That's what it came from. I think I did something with grads. That's what it
Mm,
was. And he was like, oh, what do we do next? I was like, if I'm you, don't go and work at a business. Honestly, go and be a gas engineer. Go and be a
mm,
sparker. Go and do something like, because your job's going to be, it'll get impacted at some point. But right now, the near future, it's not going to happen. Um, and if it does, it's going to be, it's going to be through smart tech, home tech, IoT, and stuff like that. Um, but I guess there's something around that fact of what is the skill set needed now. So if you think about the skill set of the future of L&D, okay, and maybe go a bit wild with this, a bit speculative, if you like, David, but like picture into 5 to 10 years of L&D.
mhm,
What does that team look like at that point? How does that team operate? How does that team serve? Does that team even exist? Like,
mm.
what's your take on that?
Um, so I think it exists if the purpose of the learning and development team is to ensure that people are ready to perform now, and I mean in double quick time. Like, so, we've got emerging skills and shifting priorities, a real need for agility across our organization. If we're going to move to more of a skills based organization, then you're going to have to deploy people pretty quickly. But you're going to have to give them guardrails to make sure that they are more predictably and reliably going to perform and succeed in those roles. So the learning and development team can help wherever anybody is deployed, and ensure that risks are minimized, whilst also preparing the organization en masse to pivot as and when required. Now, learning and development in my ideal world, Dan, in 5 years, will be ensuring that the enormous amount of money and time spent on management and leadership actually delivers a result as well. Because that's been the biggest money pit, I think, in business history. What a waste of money. Every single penny ever spent on that has ever been, because we've never helped anybody do the actual job. We've only
Mm.
ever helped them to say these are the core skills of a leader, and do that. So finally, we will be equipping managers and leaders with the skills and the high level capabilities to actually be successful in those jobs that they're employed in. So there's some actually really critical roles, but it's going to be, as I said to you before, in product management, in the analysis, in the stakeholder management, with the having the gumption to actually bring a stakeholder with you when, because one thing that I don't think he's going to change in a hurry, Dan, is when the stakeholder says, Dan, could you do us some training? Right?
Mhm.
Like the yes, we could do you with some training for you crowd. Hopefully that becomes extinct because it's just not needed. AI can do that better than a human. Just pull together, the remnants of courses on the internet and then deliver that. It could be just as successful because that stuff doesn't work. Um, but in actually ensuring that people have the map of the terrain of your organization, that they know how to operate and be successful far quicker than trying to figure it out themselves, I think is an absolutely critical role. But it's not going to be the provision and the delivery of training and learning.
Mm.
I love what Nick Shackleton Jones says about learning elimination. I think that's got to be the way. Just guide and support people to do more of the right stuff instead of relying on them remembering, which has got to be the most fragile way of possibly influencing the way that people do their work. So so I am very hopeful, but a strategic learning and development function that is aimed at equipping people today and helping the organization to pivot, whilst also providing all of this opportunity for people inside an organization. How much better would you feel about your work, Danny, if you felt that there were options made available to you and your organization was actually building bridges between where you are and where you could be, without going back to the old days, which is just giving you the title, and then letting you figure out when you get there. It's not spoon feeding you, but it's at least providing you with maps, and bridges, and breadcrumbs. I think I might be mixing my metaphor somehow here, Dan. In order to help you to do what it is that you need to do, because that's the only way you're going to keep your best people. That's the only way you're going to achieve the agility required. And that's when we're going to stop saying stuff like we've got the wrong people, when we might have the right people. They just don't have the right skills.
It's interesting. I think I like your future, David, because I don't think L&D should disappear. I think it needs to evolve. Like, and obviously the provocative side of me is like kill L&D, and then when you hear the echoes of silence, then
Hmm.
you know you've done a good job. But the reality of it is it'll need to be there. It'll just need to evolve into a better problem solving team or whatever.
Can I just
Um,
throw in there, Dan, one more thing, right? I've just thought of this as a metaphor. Now, it might work, and it might be, and your listener might take a lot from it, or otherwise it might fall flat on its face. But I'm willing to give it a go. Do you
Go
know
for it.
what it is? Um, AI is the meteor, right? And it will wipe out the dinosaurs, but it will not wipe out life on Earth. What will survive is the L&D function that is willing to utilize AI in order to achieve its actual goals. But the dinosaurs, the great big platforms full of content, exhaustive curricula, your 5-day leadership program, and all of that nonsense that was very expensive and very heavy, got you a lot of credit but didn't actually deliver you any results, that that will that will be wiped out. And like what happened with the meteor after the dinosaurs, smaller, more agile life that was able to withstand that hit, that's what's going to be left. And I think that um, uh, that has got the potential to be a lot more powerful than everything that came before. But do you know what, Dan? That's going to take for anybody to survive that. We're going to have to let go of our ego. We're going to have to admit that there was stuff we did and we spent our money on, things that we convinced our stakeholders, and perhaps we even got Employee of the Month awards for launching. It didn't work, but you've got something that you think will. So yeah, meteors, dinosaurs, and life after dinosaurs.
So I like your metaphor. I'm going to build on your metaphor, David.
Beautiful.
Um, I think the fact that the meteor is coming, right? And I think there needs to be a mindset and an awareness that, oh, that star is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's coming. And there needs to
Mm-hmm.
be a self awareness to acknowledge, to look up and go, holy shit, like. But there's a mindset shift what needs to change, and I guess I use the analogy of spies, right? If you think about work, work is a subscription model,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a consistency. Its approach it consists of services, products, interactions, and experiences.
Mm.
And each week, each month, a customer, your employee, decides whether they're going to continue subscribing to that based on how them services, products, interactions, experiences work. But there's a mindset shift. What needs to see the mindset shift. What needs to be is like looking up. It's that thing of, oh, something needs to change. Things need to change. As if not, there's a big fucking giant meteor coming at us, and we need to get out of the way of this and figure it out. And I think that for me is the thing what I'm slowly starting to see. The retail company, what you mentioned, obviously we won't name check it, but the leader of that is definitely one of the people who's looking up, going, "Oh, that star's getting bigger. How do
Mm.
we get out of the way of this really, really quick?" Um, but I'm not going to let you off. We have one more question. So right at the start, I asked you to roll a dice, and you picked number 3.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is what's the one lie you're still telling yourself? What's the answer to that question, David?
That I might need that comb again.
Amazing. Oh, he's just looking at the side going, "Do you remember me?"
Gathering dust.
Oh, wow. Wow. It's fair enough. It is fair enough. Where can people follow you, David? Where can they stay up to date? I don't know if you mentioned it, but you have a podcast, so maybe mention that as well.
I do have a podcast. Thanks for mentioning it, Dan. Yes, I'm the host of the Learning and Development podcast, and you'll be able to find me on Twitter at David in Learning, or X, sorry. I am over on Threads as well. It's a much nicer place to be. But also, you'll be able to find me and a lot of what I'm talking about at 360learning.com.
Awesome. I'll put all of them in the show notes. David, been an absolute pleasure as always. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Danny. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.